For coming down. I want to welcome the Speaker and Senator Skelos and Senator Klein. We just had a good meeting, went about an hour and a half on a number of issues. It was our first leaders meeting to discuss the budget and some of the issues that are going to be dealt with during the session. We spoke about the Sandy relief aid and the status of that program. As you know, it passed the Senate. We're very excited about that. It's a big win for the state of New York and the other states that were affected. We want to thank the Senate. We want to thank the House. We want to thank our congressional delegation that worked very hard. And we're starting to discuss the state's plans in actually implementing that. It's very important that we get assistance to people right away. People have been suffering for too long, and we want the state to be a facilitator of that process. We spoke about the issue of casinos. It is a complicated issue, and we started to have conversations to work through that. There'll be more discussions as the conference is consulted, respective conferences, to see what their position is on the issue of casinos, and we'll keep discussing that topic. And we spoke about teacher evaluations, which is a timely and an important topic. Teacher evaluations are probably one of the most important educational reforms that's going on in the nation right now. State of New York has begun to implement teacher evaluations. Frankly, I believe the reason we've made such great progress in implementing the teacher evaluations is because last year this legislature linked the increase in state aid to the adoption of teacher evaluations by districts across the state. Overwhelmingly, school districts have adopted teacher evaluation plans, and we're very excited about that, and I think it vindicates our approach from last year. There's been one notable exception, and that's been the city of New York. They missed the deadline to implement their teacher evaluation plan. They lost last year's increase in state aid, which is about $250 million. We want to accomplish two things. We want to have the teacher evaluations plan implemented, and we want to help the children of the city of New York. We are not here to reduce funding to a locality. We believe that the deadline would actually accomplish the goal of passing the teacher evaluations, which it did, except, as I said, for a few exceptions, the notable one being the city of New York. The city has been unable to come to terms with the union. I told the leaders this morning that it is my intention to firmly request that the city of New York and the teachers union resolve their differences, come to an agreement, negotiate a settlement, put a teacher evaluation system in place, and do the best they can to educate the children of the city of New York, because that is what this is about. I think the impasse must be resolved. I also said to the leaders that it's my intention, if the impasse is not resolved shortly, to propose a law that would have the state take over the evaluation process, and the state impose an evaluation system on the city of New York if the parties can't come to an agreement. The state would act through SED and the Board of Regents, which approves these plans in any event. So my strong hope is that the mayor and the teachers union arrive at a negotiated settlement. That's the way the system is supposed to work. That's the way it's worked for many, many years. I understand their differences. I also believe they can get past them for the good of education. If they don't, then let the state step in and let the state handle the evaluation process, determine an evaluation process, and impose it on the city of New York. With that, I'd ask my colleagues if they have any comments or any questions.
Governor, will there be any chance in your proposal for imposing teacher evaluations that you make it retroactive so that New York City can get that money that they lost?
Mike, they missed the deadline. A deadline is a deadline. As I said in this room, to the same question, the system worked extraordinarily well last year. That's what we have to remember. The system worked. So I want to honor the system. And no, deadline passed, you lost the money, you lost the money. We're now talking about next year's money, and the new deadline, which by the way is September. The past deadline was January 17th. We made the first deadline January 17th because just on a timing scenario of when the budget passed. It is now going to every September. So the next deadline is September. And this is about making sure for the next deadline that there is a teacher evaluation in place so they're not penalized again by the state. They also have an additional problem that much of the federal money was dependent on a teacher evaluation plan being in place. So the city has two financial issues, the state funding as well as federal funding.
Governor, actually, a two-part question, one to you, which is, have you informed the mayor and the Michael Mulgrew of this decision? And two, are the leaders on board with this type of legislation?
I've been having discussions with the city and with the teachers union over the past few days. I had this conversation with the leaders. I'll brief the city and the union with it on the conversation right after this discussion. I had the conversation with the leaders inside where I told them this is my thinking and my idea, and we'll see how things go, and we'll explore it as necessary.
And leaders, do you, Speaker and senators, do you agree with this approach?
I don't want to see the children of the city of New York lose $250 million in perpetuity because two people can't make an agreement. And, while I haven't fully examined the governor's proposal and, the exact language of it, I think it is appropriate to put in place a system of default to make sure that children don't lose the resources that those $250 will provide.
I agree with the governor that the deadline has passed, and hopefully the two sides will come together prospectively.
I agree with the governor's decision. I think we can't have another situation where the union and the mayor can't agree and our children suffer because of that. And I think the state education department has to step in and make the decision on teacher evaluations.
So Senator Scales, just so I'm clear though, do you agree with the governor that if there is no agreement in place by a certain time period that the state should step in?
Yes.
Governor, traditionally, elected leaders and governors of this state have been extremely reluctant to inject themselves into collective bargaining. It seems like you certainly are doing that in this case. Do you see this as extraordinary and justifiable because of the effect on children, or is this a new philosophy?
No, exactly. Look, we have total respect for the concept of collective bargaining. This system was designed with just that in mind, right? It's premised on the belief in collective bargaining. And this is truly an extraordinary circumstance. We have about 700 school districts in this state, all but a very small handful, and the notable one being the city of New York, have arrived at a resolution. But now you're in a situation where the city of New York has not come to terms. They've lost one round of funding. This could theoretically happen again. Not only do you lose, as I mentioned before, the state funding, you're in peril of losing the federal funding, which is truly significant. So it is an extraordinary circumstance. Now remember, SED approves these plans anyway. SED and the Board of Regents, they approve the plans anyway, so they're approving all 700 plans. It was a submission to SED upon SED's approval, and this would have SED as the default, as the Speaker said, stepping in to not just approve the plan, but actually impose a plan if the city and the teachers union don't shortly reach a resolution. I'm hopeful that they do. I believe that they will. I am an optimist. But in the case that they don't, this will be the default mechanism.
How much time will you give them before you propose it?
Well, it's, this is, we're all grown-ups. They understand the severity of the situation, and now maybe with this default mechanism, it will give them a different perspective on the situation.
Governor, if the vast majority of districts that have already done their evaluations end up at some point in their collective bargaining where they lose this. Would you also impose it on other districts?
This is just about New York City, Mike. You know, this is where we are. It's just about New York City.
Governor, in terms of the casino legislation, do you feel as though the legislature should have some input in where those casinos are located, which you consider allowing them to be part of the process of deciding?
I think we had a very good discussion with that, on that issue inside. I think we all agree. The legislature's role in setting policy is very important. This is a potential major economic boom for upstate New York. We think it's one of the best possibilities that we have. So their role is very important. We also all agree that the actual selection of bids, specific locations, should be left to an independent, non-political body. So I think we're in conceptual agreement on that.
Will you be setting some sort of framework with legislative input for that body?
Exactly.
Can you talk about what criteria, if any, you've agreed to already for that?
We're not there yet, Jimmy. We're talking about this was our first conversation, so we're not there yet on the details. It was more conceptual.
Governor, on the casino piece, I mean, do you envision then there'll be the constitutional amendment that would be approved again this year? There would be some enabling legislation, and in that enabling legislation, would there be some sort of broad, be this region, like there would be spelled out more specifically?
Regions, yes, Joe. And what you're looking for, eligible regions, eligible counties, what the criteria are in that procurement, in that bid. We're not just looking for a casino. We want a resort destination. We want a regional tourism attraction. We want to create jobs. We want the approval of the local communities. So all of that would be part of it.
So then you think that when lawmakers vote on it in legislation, they would know that it's going to be in specific counties?
No, they would know eligible counties, but the system would be predicated on bids coming in from potential developers and an independent body then making the actual selection.
But then when voters, when voters go to the polls this November, they would have a pretty clear sense of it's going to be in specific.
They would know that it could be in these regions, these counties are eligible geographic units, and then see what bids come in, what proposals come in, what is the best one in those areas.
Do you think that's important for the public to know in November?
Yes.
More specifically where those things are
Yes, and it's important for the public to know, it's important for the legislature to know, what is the plan? What is the plan that we're voting on, one way or the other? Legislative vote, or a citizen walks into a ballot and pulls a lever.
Could you just, each of the legislative leaders, just outline briefly what you want in a casino enabling legislation and what you don't want?
I would just say it's still evolving. I think we're talking about it. It was the first conversation. I think generally members would like to know what the general plan is.
I think right now we all agree that the decision on what vendors are chosen should be made by an independent commission with no involvement from the legislature.
For the leaders, do you all agree then that the first phase should just be 3 upstate casinos?
I think that's still evolving.
We're talking about that.
It's evolving.
Evolving is the word of the day, by the way, if you haven't noticed.
I wanted to say evolving, but the Women's Equality Act, wondered if you discussed that and what you think of Senator Skelos' comments, how he characterized the abortion part of the law yesterday.
Look, we have not discussed that issue. We have many issues to discuss. I'm sure that we will agree on some, we'll disagree on some. And if we do our jobs properly at the end of the day, we'll come up with a package of accomplishments that we can agree on and move forward on.
Not to put Senator Skelos on the spot, what do you think about his comments that it would mean more late-term abortions, partial birth abortions, you could have an abortion up to the day that the baby would be born, and that he feels that that...
We haven't discussed the issue, and as I said, there'll be issues we agree on, issues we disagree on, and we'll have those conversations down the road.
Is that an accurate characterization of your bill?
We didn't have that conversation, and I'd rather first let us have Let us have the conversation, and then I'll discuss it with you.
Yesterday you said you would not be surprised if the polls show that after the gun bill, your numbers went down. Well, the first poll was out today. Are you surprised at the 15-point drop in popularity?
Not at all. I know this issue very well, Ken. I've been dealing with this issue very well. I know the politics of it. I know the sensitivity of it. We worked on this issue back in the Clinton administration. I understand the sensitivity. I understand the fear. Gun owners hear gun control laws, and they're afraid that you're talking about taking their gun away, and you're talking about the Second Amendment. And that is their instinct. Many of them are skeptical about government. Many of them are cynical about government. And they hear a gun control law, they own a gun, and they say, you're trying to control my gun. That is their first instinct. And they're adamant in that, and they're strong in that. I understand that. And I understand the political sensitivity of this issue. That is not the case with the law that we passed, right? And the more they understand the law and the more they hear about the law, the better they're going to feel, because it has nothing to do with the legitimate ownership of a gun. It has to do with keeping guns out of the hands of people who are mentally ill, keeping guns out of the hands of criminals. Are you going to turn off your phone? Or you want me to answer it for you? Give it, I'll answer.
Actually, you would be interested.
Keeping guns out of the hands of mentally ill, keeping guns out of the hands of criminals, and cracking down on illegal guns. That's what this is about. This is not about legal gun ownership by law-abiding citizens, period. But I understand the sensitivity very, very well. And we all knew it going in. I said to my colleagues who voted for this, I have great respect for them. I believe this is one of the greatest accomplishments that we have achieved in the past 2 years. I think it is, frankly, admirable that, knowing that it's politically sensitive, we passed this piece of legislation. You know, there's no reason, there's no mystery to the fact that we've been dealing with this issue as a government and as a society for decades without action. Why? Because it's politically sensitive. But we are not here to duck the tough issues. We are here to take on the tough issues, right? I said to my colleagues, they elect us to lead, and they elect us to solve the problems that have dogged this state and society for many, many years. And I understand the political desire to sidestep the tough ones. That's not why we were elected. That's not why I'm here. That's not who I am. That's not what I'm going to do. And I think on this specific, the more people hear about it, the better they will feel. But I understand fully their sensitivity and their feelings.
Do you think the drop is solely because of the gun issue?
Yes.
That's not what they're, yeah, thanks. They talked about, and they're having more information tomorrow about what they said was sort of your left-leaning in the state of the state, and that turned off some voters.
All right. No.
Governor, what do you think, can you speak to the lawsuit that was brought on, I believe, by the Rifle Pistol Association, or did they say?
Yeah, I haven't seen the lawsuit. I think if you look back, every time the state has passed a gun control bill, there's been a lawsuit. So the fact that there's a lawsuit doesn't surprise me.
So you don't think it passes constitutional muster, the law that you did?
Yes.
What do you make of the skepticism from Stephanie Miner over your pension proposal that was in the budget? And do you want her to stay on as the Democratic Party co-chairman?
Yeah, fine, Nick. You know, as I said yesterday, the pension plan is an option that a mayor can choose to take, a county executive can choose to take or not. If you're skeptical about it, don't take it. I mean, it's not a mandate. Nobody said Syracuse must do this. Any county must do this. If she doesn't think it's appealing to her, then don't take the program. It's that simple.
Were you surprised that she has been so skeptical of this proposal? And again, do you want her to stay in that position as a Democratic Party?
Yeah, Nick, yes. You know, one thing has nothing to do with the other. You know, her political position has nothing to do with her feelings as a mayor on a government program. If she thinks, look, it is a financing plan, and you can have there can be a variety of opinions on whether or not you want to finance a pension cost for your locality. And some will, some won't. That's why it's an option. That's why it's not a mandate. I understand that. And it is financing. I'm sure if you said to the cities of this state, would you rather have large amounts of cash from the state of New York rather than financing, they would say, I'd rather have large amounts of cash. I know, except that's not an option in life, right? But that would be everybody's option A. We don't have that option. Option B is, let's find a financing scenario, which is what we did here.
Did you gentlemen discuss the minimum wage that's included
No.
in the governor's budget?
Governor, now that the Sandy aid package has been approved, how much of that will be for long-term mitigation, longer beaches, or seawalls even an option?
You have both in there, Zach. I can get you the proportions, but you have significant long-term mitigation investments, build back better investments, not just restoring, building back better, and you also have emergency needs. But I can get you the exact percentages.
On evaluations, the state education department would be in charge of selecting a system and implementing it as well?
Yes, sir. Well, no, not implementing. The city would implement. This is about coming up with a plan. The original system is the local school district and the union works out a plan. It's approved by SED. It's implemented by the locality.
A lot of issues have been around what the system would look like if implemented. So, if SED were to select a system, there still could be issues around actual.
The city would implement the system that SED, after discussing with the city and the union and hearing both sides, SED Board of Regents makes a decision. They approve a system. The city implements that system.
Does that have any impact on the February 15th deadline that SED has set around Title I and Title II?
Only if they have an agreement.
One of the big sticking points on that has been the issue of a sunset. The mayor, Chancellor Walcott, said that the union's demands for a one-year sunset are unreasonable and attempt to gut the bill. Do you think that's a credible argument on the part of the city?
I don't think the issue of sunset could ever happen. Sunset suggests, well, they could do a 2-year evaluation plan and then in year 3 it goes away. What that leaves out is the state's intention, my personal intention, the bill that the legislature passed last year, which conditions the state increases on, the state education increases on a teacher evaluation plan in place. And it was not, we didn't intend to have a 1-year plan or a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan. This was a teacher evaluation system that was supposed to be in place going forward, period. By the way, the federal money is contingent on teacher evaluation systems being in place. So if a plan were to sunset in year 2 in a locality, they're going to have the same problem they have right now. They're not going to qualify for the state increase. They're not going to qualify for the federal funding. And they would be exactly where they are today if they thought it could sunset, quote unquote, after year 1 or year 2 or year 3 or year 4.
Governor, is that a legitimate claim by the mayor then that the union is wrong in pushing for this?
The mayor's point is, by their contract sunsets at the end of year 2 or whatever it was. Yes, that may be true. Our intention, and I believe I speak for the legislature here also, the law that we passed was not intended to be a 1-year law or a 2-year law. We want a teacher evaluation system in place, period, going into the future. This was not about a temporary teacher evaluation system. So the state increase in state aid will still be contingent on an evaluation system being in place. The federal money is already contingent for many school districts on an evaluation system being in place. So I don't think it's as easy as saying it's going to sunset, because any district that sunsets would be exactly where the city of New York is today.
The Sandy relief bill contains $16 billion for community development block grants to be split among the affected states. What's New York's share going to be?
We are going to find out the end of this week.
You got any promises from Mr. Donovan or any other federal
Well,
official?
by the initial assessment, Jimmy, it was just over 50%. It was over 50%. I wouldn't say just over 50%.
Minimum of that CDBG money?
That was the initial assessment. We've submitted more information since then, so we have to see what CDBG comes up with.
What are we going to use that money for?
That's in the, we presented a whole plan to Congress of what we would do with the CDBG money, and we can get you a copy of that.
approving layoffs, are you aware of them, and do they have anything to do with the fact that the toll hike was next?
I am not aware of them, and I do not know.
Governor, if the poll reaction is the public not understanding the gun control bill, and that you think they'll come around when they understand it, does that go to the point that if there were 3 days of letting that age, if there wasn't a message necessity,
No.
that this would be better?
No, Mike, don't get me wrong. I think part of it is the bill is technical and people don't understand the bill. The main point is people who are gun owners are very sensitive about government exercising gun control. Period. End of statement. And they feel very strongly about that. And that's why this has been a very politically difficult issue for decades. For decades. You know, why hasn't government done anything? Because politically it is very, very difficult. That's what they're saying. And I'm a gun owner, and I don't believe government should be passing any laws that deal with guns. And the words gun control, we find offensive. It violates the Second Amendment. That's what they're saying. And that's what they believe passionately. And that's what makes it difficult. And my position is, I respect your rights as a gun owner. And I respect your legitimate rights. And I respect the Second Amendment. But we do need to have government involvement because we're trying to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill and out of the hands of criminals, and we're trying to limit the number of illegal guns. And you do need government involvement to do that. And their position is, I don't want any government involvement because I'm afraid it's a slippery slope and you're going to wind up trying to take my gun. And it's that sensitivity to the issue. And that is why politicians have stayed away from this issue for a very long period of time because it is sensitive. Do I think it gets better when people realize there was no slippery slope and this wasn't really an attempt to take legitimate guns or control legitimate guns? Yes, but is that going to change the basic dynamic? Not at all. And that's why I'm proud of the votes of the legislature. I sent them a letter that I wrote after thinking about it a lot over the past few days. It was a tough vote. It was a gutsy vote. It was clearly the right thing. I believe it will be one of the best things these legislators have done in their career. I believe it will save lives. If you ask me for a short list of the really great things we've done, this is going to be right up at the top. And I applaud them, Mike, because, you know, the tough ones, the lingering problems of society tend to be tough issues. That's why they're lingering. And they stepped up to the plate and they did it.
Whatever you said earlier, that when people understand the bill better and there's more discussion of it, that people will understand it and maybe that public reaction will change. But you didn't have that. You don't think that would have helped?
No, not the bill. What they're saying is, I think you're going to try to come take my gun. And that's where this is going to lead. That's what they're saying. I don't want to read your bill. I'm afraid government is trying to take my gun. And government is trying to interfere with my legitimate right and my Second Amendment right. And the only way, Mike, people will see that's not true is when it doesn't happen.
Their argument, gun right groups, is that in a year, the guns that they own, if they don't register them, if they don't take the proper steps in the law, that they will be in violation of the law.
Joe.
And then there would be something illegal.
Joe.
They would have an illegal gun.
If you have an assault weapon, which we believe is an extraordinarily dangerous weapon, in the wrong hands, you have it, you own it, you register it if you want to keep it. People register handguns all the time. We've registered handguns for many, many years. This is a simpler registration than a handgun. So you register an assault weapon if you own it, period. It's a postcard, simple registration. Why? because we're setting up a system where we can do mental health checks, and we can do criminal background checks, and make sure they don't have dangerous weapons like assault weapons, but then you need to know where the assault weapons are, because you need a database to check it against. Find out a person is mentally ill. Okay, let's find out if they have an assault weapon. You need to have that information. And that's the system that we're setting up.
Legislators were handed a note, basically, from Remington Arms and a union that represents them, saying that they have offers from 3 other states to have facilities and tax incentives to leave New York. Wondering what your reaction is.
Well, companies all day long get offers to leave New York and get tax incentive packages to leave New York, and we're in that battle constantly. That is daily fare for us.
Would you be interested in allowing a phase-in for the increase in the minimum wage as opposed to letting it take effect?
We are going to talk about the minimum wage in the future. I want to thank the leaders very much for taking the time this morning. It was a very good meeting. It will be the first of many, but it was an auspicious start. Thank you.